Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Build an Application workshop. My name is Jenelle. You might have seen me running some of the other workshops, but this one is where I get to teach you all something, hopefully. So like this workshop says, we're going to be building an application, and the purpose of this workshop is not so that you understand every little intricacy of what's going on, but so that we use tools that are already provided in some source code that I give you in the download instructions in order to create something this weekend, because I really want to share with you all how you can create something like an application. And I should specify that this is for desktop applications. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And yes, I'm a minion. I love Despicable Me, and this is your sign to enter the costume contest tomorrow, because this is what you're up against. So make sure your costume is good. So hello, everybody. Again, my name is Jenelle Millison. I'm originally from Lakewood, Colorado, and I'm a junior computer science major here at UTSA. And I have a concentration in data science and a minor in math. And I'm also a CodeQuantum organizer. And if I'm looking up at the screen a lot, it's because that is where all of your comments are, and I want to make sure to catch those. Feel free to put them in the chat during, and I will try my best to answer everything. But I'm also trying to leave some time at the end for any lingering questions. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the workshop. So you might have seen on the CodeQuantum schedule, there is a document by this workshop and then also by the Intro to Java workshop that asks that you download a couple things. And this one asks that you download 4 things: Java, Eclipse, JavaFX, and Scene Builder. So I wanted to put that into context really quick so you know what we're using each one for and you're not just downloading a bunch of things. So Java is our programming language that we'll be using. Eclipse is our IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, which is where we will be typing out our code, and then we will also be running our code through Eclipse. JavaFX is our framework for making desktop applications. So you might have gone to Swinny's workshop earlier, and he showed us how you can extend certain classes and get all of their methods into your project. And so JavaFX, we're going to extend the application class so that we can utilize all those methods and all of the code that JavaFX already has to make building our desktop app easier. And then the last thing I had you download is Scene Builder. Scene Builder is a graphical user interface to help create a user interface for our app. So rather than typing a bunch of lines of code and not really knowing where it's going to end up, we can go ahead and put all of the buttons and labels and text and everything on our app, how we want it to look in Scene Builder, and it will generate code for us back in Eclipse. So I'm going to switch my screen a little bit. And you should be seeing Eclipse. This is what basic Eclipse looks like. Sorry for the light mode. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So the app that we're building today is a basic trick or treat app. So it's going to say at the top, it's going to say trick or treat. We're going to have a little box for you to enter the quantity of tricks or the quantity of treats, and then 2 buttons, a trick and a treat, so that you can add to each of those and it will update how many tricks and treats that you have. And then we'll also do some special stuff with some of the styling, and we'll make it change screens when you reach a certain number of tricks. So with that brief overview of the project, it might not be completely clear what we're doing right now, but when I go ahead and add some buttons, hopefully it will become clear. So first, we're going to create our project. So if I go File, New, and I want to go all the way down to Other, because we want a JavaFX project. And so you should see a file folder list of a bunch of different things, and we want JavaFX. So we click JavaFX and then JavaFX project. And what we're going to name it is we're going to name it trick or treat. And if we hit next, it'll ask us some more questions, but I'm just going to go with the default, what it gives us. So we'll hit finish. So now on the left, we have this little trick or treat project, and we have this source folder where all of our code will go. This looks like a duplicate, so let me delete this one, and we'll create our new one to code live. So Other, JavaFX, or true. All right. Let me see. Yeah, so this already has some of the code, so I'm just going to delete some of this code out of here from when I was practicing for this workshop. So we'll delete these files and we'll start fresh. All right, so when you create your project, it should look like this. It should have a main.java and then an application.css, and this should be completely empty. So the only thing is it's in this package called application, so we need to specify that at the top, but that's just how JavaFX sets it up for us. So then this is our class, so we can say public class main, and like I said, we're going to be extending application, because application is the JavaFX framework, or it's part of the JavaFX framework that we're going to be using. And so we get this error because it's not imported, so we'll go ahead and import it. So this is our class, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a quick check, and I'm going to use the same check that I provided for you in the documentation and install instructions. So we have some code that I have there, and so I'm going to copy and paste that code in here to make sure that JavaFX is working properly. So if I do that, and the reason why I'm doing this is because you have access to this code in that in the document that I sent you with the installation instructions. So again, we just have to specify our package, and our package is application. All right, so I'm going to run this just to make sure it works, and then we're going to go through and we're going to look at what it does and how we can use this to make our own application. So if I run it, it says we're getting an error somewhere. Let's see. So if we run it, we get this box that says hello world, and there's a button and it says hello world, and we click it a bunch of times. And I commented out this line because it was causing an error because we have not set up our style sheet yet, which is something we will be doing later. So let's go and see what this actually does. So like I said, we're using the application part of JavaFX. We're importing application, and then we're extending it here. And then we have our main method. So our main method only contains one thing, and the one thing it contains is launch. And this is telling our application to launch. And when we tell it launch, what it looks for is this start method. And this start method, we have to use an override because there's a built-in start method. And so this one is letting us decide for ourselves what we want the program to start with. And so I want to briefly go over the structure of something like what we see here so that you know what I'm talking about when I say stage, when I say pane, and when I say controls or button. So I will go back to my presentation. So when I say stage, what I'm talking about is this entire window frame itself. So I'm talking about the window itself. That is the stage. That is the basis for our application. And then on top of the stage, we have panes. And panes are just different areas that we can put controls on. And what a control is it's something like a button or text or a label, things like that. So controls are what's going to allow the user to interact with our application, and controls need to be on a pane, and the pane needs to be on a stage. So keep that in mind when we're going through the code here. So it takes as an argument the primary stage, or a stage called primary stage. And so we're going to set the title of that primary stage to Hello World. And you'll see here that this is this title up in the top left corner is Hello World. And then we're also creating a button. So we're using the button class from JavaFX, which is right here. We import it. And we are creating a new button and then using the setText method in order to have that button say hello world. And then we want the button to do something when we press it. So we have this set on action, and we need an event, which is the button getting clicked, and then we need to handle that event. So this method right here will handle the event of the button being pressed. And so when the button is pressed, it will system.out.println hello world, which is exactly what we see happening. It prints hello world a lot. But right now, we just have a stage and we have a button. We haven't done anything to connect them. The stage needs to have a pane with a button on it in order for them all to be connected. So how we do that is we create a pane. We're just calling it root. And in this case, it's a stack pane. I'll get into the different types of panes here shortly. And then we are using the root pane that we've created in order to add a button onto it. And so all of these methods and functions can be found in documentation. And you might ask, how did I know to come up with these things? You can go to JavaFX documentation online, and you can look up their different functions, things like that. I usually go to FX docs, and you can look at different things that you can do, like here's our stack pane, and it'll tell you all about what a stack pane is if you want to learn more about that. But like I said, I just want to get you started with a project. I don't want to spend too much time on what everything exactly does. So we're adding our button to the pane, and then using this set scene, we are adding the pane to our stage or our window. So that's the final thing. Now that they're glued all together, we can go ahead and show it, and it'll be this output that you see here with this hello world. So that's a brief overview about how something like this would work. But what if we don't know all of this code? What if we don't know how to do this button.setOnAction, or we don't want to create the button ourselves? That's what Scene Builder is for. Scene Builder will help us set up our entire window without having to go through and write this code ourselves. So what we are going to do is we're going to create an fxml file, because Scene Builder is going to use this fxml file to allow us to drag and drop, and then the drag and drop will be transferred into code in the fxml. And so fxml is just like FX Markdown language, and so that is just telling the application how to format things on it. So if we go ahead and go to new, and I said we want an fxml document, so we're going to go down to other. And in this JavaFX project folder, you should see new fxml document. So we can click next, and we'll title this home screen because it'll be the home screen of our app. And then we can click finish. And we see over here we have this fxml document, and I'm not quite sure, what this code does. So let's go ahead and open it up in Scene Builder and see what we're working with. And I did that by just quickly right-clicking on the fxml, and then you can go to Open with Scene Builder if you've installed it. So this is what Scene Builder looks like. We have some controls both on the left and right side of our screen, which I will go through. But first, I want to go over what it gives us. So we originally have an anchor pane. So if you click on it, this little blue crosshairs will come up, and you can expand the pane. And so we'll drag out our pane to be pretty sizable. And right now, there's nothing else on our screen besides this pane. So what can we add? Well, if we look up here to the left, we have a bunch of different containers. And so these are where all of our panes are. So we can add another anchor pane, we can add border panes, we can add a horizontal box. These are ways to format the different controls that you will have on your application. So for the purposes of this workshop, we're just going to use the anchor pane because it's the most lenient. It's very free form, and I can drag and drop whatever I want, wherever I want on it, unlike something that's like more of this grid pane. You can see if you want to drag and drop anything on it, you have to drag and drop them into these boxes, whereas an anchor pane, I can drag and drop anywhere. So now what are we going to drag and drop onto our application? What is our application going to look like? So if we minimize containers and we go down to controls, we have here some familiar things like our button. And then we have other things as well. So we have an image view, so you can add images. We have menu bars. We have, let's see what else we got in here. We have a label, which is just plain text. And you can just resize this using your cursor. We also have text areas, which allows your user to write in a lot of information. But maybe if you want them to just write in a single number, like we will for this purpose, you can use a text field and allow your user to write in different things. So these are the three that we're going to stick with for this workshop: is our button, the text field, and the label. But you are more than welcome to go through here and search for more. So how do you change these sort of things? It's an interface, so it's pretty friendly. So what you can do is if you want to change the label, we'll call this trick or treat. And then you can go to the right-hand side and you can adjust things like the font. And I know this is pretty small. I was trying to mess around with font sizes, so I'll do my best to narrate. But if you go to the right, you can change different like font types. We'll go with this one. You can change font sizes with like a slider. And so we'll just make our label for our trick or treat app here. So perfect. Now we have a title. I mentioned that we want a button that says trick, and then we want a button that says treat. So we will go ahead and implement that as well. Our trick we can change the color of the text, which is what I'm doing now with this text fill option on the right. So I changed it to orange, and then I can expand the button, and I can also expand the font size here a little bit. And then you can also copy and paste things on here. So if I select this and I say Control-C and Control-V, then we can copy this over here, and this one can say treat. And let's make it purple, just so we can say that we did. All right. And then we have this text field right here for the user to input some sort of value. I mentioned earlier that I want to know how many tricks or how many treats the user wants. So I will go ahead and add another label by dragging and dropping label on the left into our application window. And I can call this quantity and increase the size a bit, just so that our users know what they're supposed to put there. All right, and so if we're adding tricks and treats by selecting this button, we also probably want to know how many tricks or how many treats we have. So we'll add a count label to the bottom here, and we will start it off at 0. And then again, do the same thing, changing font sizes. So you can really be creative in how you want to set up your app with just these same 3 different controls, right? All we're using is a button, a label, and a text field, and that will get you pretty far. So now we have our app here that says trick or treat. It's looking pretty nice. So I'll go to the top left, I'll click File, Save. And then we can go ahead and go back to Scene Builder. And what we can do is we can go and see if this has changed anything, right? Because we created this whole like FXML document. So let's see what's going on over in Scene Builder. So if we run our application, we still get the same hello world pane. And that's because we haven't told it to utilize this FXML document that we just created. So what we can do is we can use another JavaFX tool called FXML Loader. and we can go ahead and load in any fxml document that we would like. So if we come back to our pane here, what we created over here in JavaFX is we created a pane, right? Everything in this document under hierarchy is on a pane. It's all on an anchor pane. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this stack pane with the anchor pane that we created. And then I mentioned that there's a special fxml loader that will allow us to load in our fxml document. So we want it to give us an anchor pane back because that's what root is. Root's an anchor pane. So we'll cast whatever our fxml loader gives us to be an anchor pane. So if we do fxml loader.load, then we can get the class, which is just the area that it's in. So getting the class will get main. But if we get the resources for the class, it will get whatever else is in this folder. And our resource that we want is the fxml document. So if we say home screen.fxml, and it's going to yell at me because I don't have all of the imports that I need to have. So you can go through and import them by hovering over your error. So this very first option, I know it might be hard to see again with the font sizes, but whenever you're importing things, don't import anything that says AWT or SWT or anything like that. We want everything that's JavaFX. And there's some things that are named the same, but are under AWT or SWT. So we'll import the necessary packages so that it does not yell at me anymore. And it also wants us to add a throws declaration for an exception if this file cannot be found. Again, I'm just going through and using a lot of autocompletes because I want you all to understand how to build an application, not necessarily know what each of these individual things is doing. So let's see what we have based on that. So if we expand this, we can see that, oh, now it shows our fxml document. We still have this hello world thing, and it still works, but our buttons don't work. You can type in here, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't really matter, but we got our setup going here, which is good. That's promising. And I had to drag out this pane. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to resize the scene. This set scene, the first argument is a pane, and then the second two are the dimensions of the scene. So I'll just resize this to be 1000 by 1000 pixels. That way I don't have to keep resizing it myself. And we need to go a little bit bigger. So we'll go 2000. And remember to delete all of these little Java things on my taskbar are previous iterations of this, and it can get kind of confusing. So keep up with deleting those, or else you might think that it's not making a change and you're just really looking at a previous version. Oh, so I changed the Y instead of the X. So I'll go ahead and change the X instead. All right, that looks good enough for our purposes. So next, what I want to show you is what do we do to add functionality to this? So we saw that we can add our application and we can make it look pretty, but how do we make the buttons click? Well, if we look back at the code that we have from our starter code that I gave you to make sure that JavaFX is working, we can see that we need a name, right? Because the name of the button that works is button, and it's using it to call some sort of method. And we also need some sort of cue to what it should do when an action is happening. So here, when an action is happening, it's using this method called handle, and it's printing hello world. But this looks kind of messy and maybe not the easiest thing to understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Scene Builder for a lot of that. So in order to create functionality, I'm actually going to create another class because you'll notice in Scene Builder, and again, it's a little bit small on the bottom, but on the very bottom left side, you have this controller section. And what a controller class does is it gives that functionality to your code. So if you want to learn more about controllers, views, models, you can look into the MVC design pattern, which is just a guideline of how to code so that your controller is updating your model and the model is updating what you see on the screen, so your view. But since this is a hackathon, we're just going to add a controller and then we will call it a day so that we can change some things on our application. So it's asking for a controller class, which I don't currently have. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new class by right-clicking on the application package and then going to new and class, because we just want a Java class. So the name, I can call this, let's see, I can say home screen controller. Not very creative, but that's what we'll call it. So it gives us this new controller class. And so how we have our controller class, let's go ahead and link this to Scene Builder. So ask for a controller class here. So we can type in application, because that's the package we're in, dot home screen controller. And that'll say for everything functionality-wise, you need to look to this specific file and take code from this file. But we also noticed that button had a name. And so how do we reference our objects that we have on our screen? How do we give them names? Well, we can also do that through Java or through Scene Builder. So if we click on a button, and you can see that I was working out of the Properties tab where I was setting the text and the font and the text fill, and there's a bunch of other things that you can do to make it look nice. If you scroll down a little bit, there's more style things, which we'll get into a bit later. You can also change the layout is the next tab, so you can add different padding. If I want it to be towards the bottom, I can set this one to 100, and it'll pad 100 at the top. And then I can set various ones to various values to add different padding. So that padded it a little bit out from the right and things like that. So I'll let you kind of explore the layout a bit more. You can mess with all of these widths and sizes and scales. But what we want is this code section because we want to add functionality. So what are we going to call this button? How do we know where to name it? What its name is going to be is its FX ID. So this very top field asks for an FX ID, and I'm going to call this our trick button. And then it asks on action, what do you want it to do? And so this is corresponding to a method that we will write in our controller class. So if I start a method, public void, I'll say add one, right? Because we want it to count the number of tricks and treats. So if I add one, and that's what I'll call my method that we are going to use to change the value of the count. So if I go back here on action, so on a button click, I want it to refer to the method add one. And so that's how I'm going to tell it to be able to talk to my Eclipse code. And I'll do the same thing for treat because it's going to be the same code. And I'm just going to do it twice for repetition. Well, I guess I can have it reference the same function. But later we'll have our own trick and treat count. So maybe I'll make add one trick and add one treat. Let me go back to trick and change that. And then if I go back to Eclipse, we can do add one trick instead, just so that we can keep those counts separate. Again, probably more efficient ways to do this. But since this is a hackathon, I just want to show you the very basics and how you can implement it. So now we are all set up. But again, I'm not really sure where these variables are from. Like, how do I access the FX ID here? Well, Scene Builder has this great thing to help you out. Under View, you can see Show Sample Controller Skeleton. And look, this is exactly what we need. It has, let me make this a bit bigger. It has the package that we're in, it has the class signature, it has all of our variables, the buttons. With these fxml tags, this just tells it to refer to the fxml document. That is what our changes here in Scene Builder are saved to. And so anyways, we can just go through and copy this skeleton. And let's see. Unless it's hiding behind something. There we go. So we can go ahead and copy this skeleton, and I want the variables that it has. So I'm just going to copy all the variables and then the imports as well, so I don't have to deal with that later. So if I copy the variables and the imports in here, I can see, great, it's all connected. There's no sorts of errors. So in our add one trick, I'll add some functionality to this. So I want to update the counts, which I don't have IDs for those ones yet. So let me go back and add in IDs for the count. So this is trick count, and this is treat count. So now I can do the same thing. You can copy this from the controller skeleton, or you can type it in yourself. So the syntax is just like above at fxml to give it that fxml tag, and then your variable. So we want it to be private to this class. What are the counts? They're labels. And I called it trick count and treat count. And so it's telling me here that I don't know what label is, so we can import label from JavaFX scene control. So if I want to update the counts, what I can do is I can say trick count dot set text, and I can give it a string value to set it to. So I'll just say count is 1. And I can do the same thing for treat. So treat count text. And it takes as an argument a string, and I can say count is 1. And so you might be saying, hey, like, how did you know that to change the text, all you had to do was say set text? And that's what I was showing you earlier with this JavaFX documentation, where it will have all of the different ways that you can manipulate buttons or boxes or labels or things like that. So this definitely wasn't something that I just had memorized. I just looked it up prior to this workshop because I wanted to teach you all. So if we go ahead and run this, we have our trick and treat, and it's not doing anything right now. And so don't panic. It doesn't mean that anything is necessarily wrong with our code. All it means is that our Eclipse project might not be up to date with our scene builder. So if we right-click on our Eclipse project called Trick or Treat, and then we click this refresh button, and let's see now if it will work with us here with these updates. So it's still not working. So let me double check and make sure that I did everything right. Oh, yes. So we need our action event. Sorry for forgetting that. And this is just linking it to tell it that when the action event happens, as described in Scene Builder over here with our on action, it will go to that method, and that action will be passed in to the add one treat method. The other things, let's make sure that my controller class is connected. Application.HomeScreenController. All right. So we'll try this again. All right, well, my Hello World button is working, so let's see what can be done. Oh, the reason why is because we didn't add our fxml tags, so it doesn't know what to update. So don't forget those in the functions. I do it all the time, but remember to add those. Now we should be okay. And let's go ahead and refresh. All right, let me check my code one more time. Make sure it is the same. XML. We have our trick count and our treat count. All right, let me see. I have one more idea. We'll just make sure everything is saved over here and refresh. Okay, perfect. Now it switches. So sometimes I bet it was because my scene builder was not saved. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts with this. So make sure that all of your files are saved, that you have all of your fxml tags above your variables and methods in the controller. But a recap is all we had to do was we went into scene builder and we set our controller, and then we set our and that's in the bottom left in this controller, and we set it to home screen controller, and then we went to the right for our buttons, and we gave it an ID, and we also told it what method to invoke on the action, so in this case a button press. And then we did the same for count, and we gave it an ID, and we referenced it in order to update that value in JavaFX. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the functionality of our field. So I told you that I want to know how many tricks or treats the user wants. So if we go over into Scene Builder, we have this field. To reference any value that comes in or out of here, we need to give it an ID. So we can say quantity field, and then we can save that. And then we can create a variable in our Eclipse project. So at fxml private, and it's a text field. We called it quantity field. And it wants me to import text field, so I can go ahead and do that. And then, so I'm going to create two global variables, one to hold the tricks and one to hold the treats. So I can say private int num tricks, and I'll initialize that to 0, and then private int num treats. All right, and so instead of just setting the count to 1, each time the button is pressed, each time we add one trick, I will say num tricks plus equals whatever's in the quantity field. So this is no longer really add one trick, but I'm just going to leave it there for time's sake. So really it's just add trick if you want it to be a little bit more clear with your naming. So I will say that our number of tricks is equal to, and again, if you went to Swinny's workshop, he showed the function of the integer class. So we can get the value of a string. And so the string is going to be whatever in this quantity field. So we can say quantity field dot get text, and that'll return a string, and then this integer dot value of will convert it to an int so that we can actually add it. And so what we can add here is we can say that we want to set it to the text of the count plus some other string. So in this case, we need to convert it back into a string. So we can use the integer class again and the toString. And we want to display the number of tricks. So I can do the same thing for treats. Let's copy this section. And again, you could write this out nicer, but I just like the repetition in order to kind of get some practice with these different functionalities. And so the treats is referring to the same text box, so we can have this quantity field be the exact same thing. So now we can go ahead and run this. And oh, I left off an error here, or I left off an S here in treats. So now if we enter like 10 and we click trick, it gives us an exception. So let's see what the issue is. Add one trick. Okay, so it's in line 31, the quantity field. So let's go back to quantity, and the name is right, so we'll double check that. Make sure that's saved. Get text. All right, let me try refreshing. And then if not, we'll dig a little bit deeper and see what's going on. Okay, so this one updates. Oh, that one updates too. So you know what it could have been? I could have clicked space before 10, and that will give me an error because I didn't do any sort of error checking. So, but now if I just enter 10, then it updates correctly. So you can do some error checking on the search bar. That would be great. As you can see, I just accidentally added a space and it messed it up. But again, for time's sake, we'll go ahead and move on now that we've updated our trick and treat counts. So what if I wanted to do something special when I reach a certain number of tricks or treats? So in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll our trick will be a little bit of a scare. So we'll have it switch a scene and then to an image that is showing something spooky. So what we're going to go ahead and do is first we need to know what we're trying to access. So if we're trying to switch a scene, we are trying to access the pane that the scene is on. So I will go ahead and give an ID to this pane, and I will say this is the home screen. And save that. And then when I go back here, I can use the same sort of principles that we used in main with the fxml loader. I'm actually going to copy this line and go back to my controller. And our method here will be public void switch trick scene. And so with every switch, we're going to need an action event, but this isn't coming from anything happening on the pane. This is coming from something happening here in this add one trick. So we'll go ahead and call if our value of tricks is too much. So if num tricks, we'll just say if it's greater than 20, then we will call the switch trick scene. And we'll pass the same action event that caused it to, that caused the button to be pressed. So that was the action event, was the button being pressed, and we'll pass that to our switch trick scene. And so just so we don't get these confused, I'll call this event instead. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to load our new scene. So like I said, I copied that from the code that I gave you. And so we are going to load in a new FXML. So we need a new FXML for our new screen. So we'll right click on application and I'll say new, and then I'll go to other and FXML document like we did before. And I'll call this scene. Sure. And now if I open this one with Scene Builder, we can customize it and see what we want to do with it. So this opens a new tab in Scene Builder, and like I said, you can click on the hierarchy, the anchor pane, and then this little blue crosshair appears in the middle, and you can expand out your pane. So we'll expand it to like that. And then I said I wanted it to show a spooky image. So I'll go over to the image view, and I'll throw this on here. And right now it just looks like some blank space. But if you see on the right under properties, the very first thing says image, and it's looking for a file. And so where you put this file and where you pull it from, what path you give it here, in other words, is very important, especially if you're working on a team. Because if it's saved in a path that no one else has access to on your team, then it's not going to load for them. So for example, if I saved it and I just said, it's like in my local disk, and then you go to users and JA-mill, and then you go to my Eclipse workspace, then people aren't going to understand that path because not everybody's computer has users, JA-mill, and then the Eclipse workspace. So instead, it's better to save it under a relative path, which is a setting just to the right of the 3 dots. You can say switch to relative path. And so what image I'm going to have is, it's actually in my pictures folder, but like I said, we'll save it with the project so that my other teammates can work on it. And so it's this trick image. So I'll copy it here. And how I found where my project is stored is if you go to File and Properties, it gives you this location here of whatever document you're currently on. So I can see mine's in C, Users, JA-mill, Eclipse Workspace. So if I go there, C, Users, JA-mill, and then down to my Eclipse Workspace, and I'll put it in my Trick or Treat project. And you want to save images in the bin. That's kind of what's customary. So I'll go ahead and save it here. And then I can go back to Scene Builder, and I can tell it, hey, what path should I look for this image at? It'll open up my file directory. Looks like it's having problems loading, but I can go to my C disk. I can go to Users. Hopefully, let's try that again. JA-mill. And usually these will be file folders. I think mine is just taking a while to load with the stream and this program. So I'll go down to my Trick or Treat program. Wait for it to load. While we're waiting for this, I guess, are there any questions? Oh, hi, Christian. Hi, Trevor. Thanks y'all for tuning in. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I hope that I didn't lose anybody yet. But we see that in bin application is my trick image. So I can go ahead and save it here. And big surprise, my trick image is not actually that scary. It's just a little ghost. But now that we have this, let's focus on how to change the scene to this. So we set up this FXML because we wanted it to tell it what scene to switch it to. So we're switching it to the trick scene. And instead of root, what this is going to be called is our anchor pane that we had previously, or our anchor pane that we can add. So we can call this under code, we can call this pane trick scene or trick pane, and save that. And so we can do the same thing. How we're referencing this pane is using the fxml tag, private. This is an anchor pane again. This is called trick pane. So we can say trick pane equals fxmlloader.load get class resource. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a bunch of other things to set the scene. And I realize we're short on time, so I'm actually going to paste some of this in here, and then I'll go over it with you all. So it's yelling at me here because I don't have scene imported. And then it's also yelling at me here because I don't have this thing called node imported. And like I said, it gives us a bunch of options, but we want to import the JavaFX one. So what this is doing is, like I have commented here, so we have our pane that's loaded from the fxml file, and then we have a scene. We make a scene using that pane. And then we want to get the style sheets associated with that, and that's something that I'll get to at the very end. So don't worry about this line right now. And then our stage, and it's yelling at me because I haven't imported stage, is the window that we're on. And so how we're telling the window that we're on is we're saying wherever this event is happening, so wherever the button click is happening, is where we are retrieving that window, and that's how we know what window to change, wherever the button click is happening. So now that we have all of this code, and I will upload this so that you can go through a little bit more thoroughly yourself. But since we ran into some errors earlier, we don't necessarily have the time for me to go in and type this out. But we have implemented this. So we have our switch trick scene, and it wants us to add some throws. So what if the scene can't load, which is fine, and we'll just use JavaFX to go ahead and sort that out for us. So we said that if the trick is greater than 20, so I'll enter 10. So 10 doesn't do anything, 20 doesn't do anything. But if we do it again, then our new image shows up and we've switched our scene. And so if you want, what you can do is on this scene, you can add like a back button or something so that you can go back to the original pane. But I want to recap on what we just did and then move into how to make it look a little bit nicer with CSS. So if we go back here, so what we did is we added functionality. So here are the basic steps, and I will make this available to all of you. First, you need to create a controller class for the fxml, and then you need to add that controller class to the bottom left corner of Scene Builder so that it knows what to reference so that when you set that on action, it can tell where to find that method. Then you need to give your controls fx IDs for if we want to set or get different values. You can use documentation to look up different methods, such as like set text and get text, and then you implement those methods after setting the on action to whatever you would prefer. And for switching scenes, so first we had the fxml loader load in the fxml we want to switch to. Then we created a scene based off of that pane. So we said scene, new scene equals scene, and then the argument was that pane. We assigned the proper style sheet, which again, I was like, we will get to. And then we got the current stage based on what stage the event happened on, and we switched that stage with the new scene. And then we showed the stage again. And so that's how we switched our scenes there. And so back to this, what is this? What is style sheet? And so I will show you very briefly, but a style sheet is how you can make your application look nice. So this application CSS that came with our file is how you can make it look nice. And if you actually go under Scene Builder and you click on something and you go to Properties, you can see that down below it has some like style things. So style sheets, style class, style. And so what we want to do is write some code in here so that it will change whatever IDs we have in here. So let's just change the background color and then we will call it a day. So the ID, I want to say this is the home screen BCKG for background. And so how we reference that is the syntax for CSS, which is we have a pound symbol and then we have the ID. So I just set the ID to home screen background. And then we have -fx-property, and this property is a placeholder. So for our cases, for filling in background color, it'll be -fx-background color : value. And this value is another placeholder for what color we want to put there in this case. But the other way to use CSS is by using the dot operator, which doesn't go by ID, but rather goes by control type. So if you did dot button and then -fx -background color and then a colon, then it would change all of the buttons to have these CSS styling properties. And again, CSS is just something that you can use to make your application look nice. Stands for cascading style sheets. So we'll just go ahead and change the background. So I said that that was called home screen background. And again, it's -fx and then the property we want. So background color, then a colon, and then the value. And so I want it to be indigo. And so how did I know to type this in? So if you go to Google, there's plenty of documentation. So I use this JavaFX CSS reference guide, and it'll show you all of the different things that you can do to like change the background or change different sorts of colors and things like that. So I'll let you go ahead and kind of peruse through this if you want. You can change fonts on here as well or in Scene Builder. But yeah, again, that's JavaFX CSS reference guide by Oracle. And then how did I know the color? I just went to, I Googled CSS colors and it gave me all of the keywords. And Eclipse is also nice enough to where it will autocomplete some for you. So now let's save this. And if we go to our application, the reason it's not showing up is because I commented out this style sheets in our home, and this is the first scene that's showing up. So again, we'll create a scene based off of our scene, or off of our anchor pane. Scene, our anchor pane is root. And then, so we'll add CSS to this scene, and we'll see if that will run. Ah, yes. So this should just be root. Oh, actually, that should be seen. Sorry about that. And we can get rid of this button because we no longer need the button because we've set up our trick or treat instead. So I'm going to get rid of the button, and instead of calling this hello world, I'll call it trick or treat right after this. Let's see. Set scene. We'll try to apply our style sheets just to the root, and we'll see what that gives us. This is also a little bit of intro to just how I kind of code. I try stuff out, look at some documentation, see if it works, and then go back and fix what I need to. So this has an error. running main. Because it says style.css, we want it to be application.css. So I guess that is one instance where you can't always copy over code. So now that we've specified the right style sheet, it's indigo, so you can't really see anything anymore, but we have our app that switches to a new trick, and then we can also add different treats. Just to recap, so we learned a little bit about different buttons, and we learned how to switch scenes and change labels, and then we also learned how to add some styling properties with this application.css. So I will wrap up really quick, and then I will be here all night. So if you have any questions about JavaFX, I'd be more than happy to help, especially to try to make an app. So again, I showed you the list of properties is on the CSS reference guide. We have CSS colors at W3 schools, and Eclipse autocompletes for us. But what now? So now it's your turn to build your own desktop application. You can build a to-do list, you can build a game, any of that. But the most important thing is to make it your own. It could be simple. It could be just like this, a button with counters, but have a theme. Make the colors look nicer. Be creative with it. If you need any help, look to JavaFX documentation. There are also a lot of tutorials online. You can also ask in the Contact a Mentor chat. And since I ran out of time on this workshop, I will be in Discord. My username is Jenelle, and then parentheses she, her. So feel free to reach out to me on there. But now it is your turn to go and create whatever sort of application you would like. So with that, I'll leave it at that. I'll post the code to GitHub and post the link in the Discord so that you can change it and build your own app. But thank you so much for stopping by, and happy hacking.